The argument was already underway when Isabel Graves reached the top of the stairs. She'd been told to wait in the entrance hall. Lady Catherine Blackwood had instructed her explicitly, remain below until summoned. But the raised voices carried through the manor's stone corridors with perfect clarity, and Isabel had never been good at staying silent when her future was being decided without her presence. "Another one, Mother?" The man's voice was cold, each word clipped with aristocratic precision. "How many strangers do you intend to house under this roof?" "She needs help, Nathaniel." Lady Catherine's tone remained steady, but Isabel detected the steel beneath. "And we need a governess. Mrs. Fletcher left 3 weeks ago. We need a governess with references, training. Not some woman who appeared on our doorstep with nothing but the clothes on her back, and a story I'm meant to accept without question." Isabel's hands tightened on the banister. 3 days ago, she'd been sleeping in a coaching inn stables, counting the coins she'd stolen from her stepfather's desk and praying they'd last until she found work. 2 days ago, Lady Catherine had found her in the village, somehow recognizing desperation beneath Isabel's careful composure. Yesterday, she'd been offered something impossible: safety, training, a position that might give her a future beyond running. Today, she was being discussed like a problem to be solved. The door to the study stood partially open. Isabel could see Lady Catherine's profile, back straight, hands folded calmly before her. The man, the Duke of Wycliffe, her son, stood with his back to the doorway, shoulders rigid beneath a perfectly tailored coat. "She's educated," Lady Catherine said. "Well spoken. The household staff need direction, and she can learn." "That's not the point." The Duke turned sharply, and Isabel caught her first clear glimpse of him. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 33, with dark hair and a face that might have been handsome if it weren't set in such harsh lines. "The point is that you make these decisions without consulting me. You bring strangers into my home." "Our home," Lady Catherine corrected gently. "My responsibility." His voice dropped, but the intensity didn't fade. "Everything that happens under this roof, every person who walks through that door, it falls to me, not you. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what people will assume? What they'll say? I understand that you've become suspicious of everyone since your father died." The words fell like stones into still water. The Duke went very still. Isabel knew she should retreat, should go back downstairs, wait to be summoned like she'd been told, but something in the raw grief beneath his anger kept her frozen in place. "That's unfair," he said quietly. "It's true." Lady Catherine moved closer to her son. "Nathaniel, I know the title weighs heavily. I know you feel surrounded by people wanting something from you. But not everyone has ulterior motives. Sometimes people simply need help. And sometimes," he said, turning away, "people see a title and an estate and decide help is precisely what they should pretend to need." That was when Isabel pushed the door fully open and stepped inside. Both heads turned sharply. Lady Catherine's expression showed only mild surprise, but the Duke's face darkened immediately. "I told you to wait downstairs," Lady Catherine said, not unkindly. "I'm sorry." Isabel kept her voice level, meeting the Duke's cold gaze directly. "But I won't have my character debated in my absence. If His Grace has concerns about my presence, he should address them to me." For a moment, no one spoke. The Duke stared at her, as if she'd materialized from smoke. Then his jaw tightened. "Get out." "Nathaniel." "No, Mother." He didn't raise his voice, but the command in it was absolute. If Miss Graves wishes to involve herself in this conversation, then she can begin by following basic instructions. The door. Now. Isabel didn't move. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she'd spent too many years under her stepfather's roof, learning to hide fear. "I'm here because your mother believes people deserve second chances, even if you don't." The silence that followed felt like the moment before lightning struck. "Did you just," the Duke said slowly, "refuse a direct order?" "I heard your order. I chose to finish speaking first." Isabel forced herself not to look away. "You're right that you don't know me. You're right to be cautious, but I'm not here to take advantage of anyone. I'm here because Lady Catherine offered me a chance to prove I'm worth more than the circumstances I left behind. If you're going to send me away, at least have the decency to tell me why while I'm in the room." Lady Catherine made a small sound, half laugh, half sigh. The Duke, however, looked like he was debating whether to call for footmen or throw her out himself. Then, very deliberately, he walked to the door and held it open. "Downstairs," he said. "Now. If you're still in this house in 1 hour, we'll discuss the terms of your employment and the consequences of entering rooms uninvited." His gaze locked with hers. "One misstep, Miss Graves. Just one. Do you understand?" Isabel understood perfectly. She also understood that she'd just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She nodded once and left the room, feeling his stare burning into her back with every step. The hour passed slowly. Isabel waited in the entrance hall as instructed, watching servants move efficiently through their duties, while she stood uselessly against the wall. A housemaid glanced at her curiously. The butler ignored her entirely. When Lady Catherine finally descended the stairs, her expression was carefully neutral. "He's agreed," she said simply. "You'll serve as interim governess until we secure a permanent replacement. Mrs. Hill will show you to your room and explain your duties. You'll manage the household staff, coordinate with the cook and butler, and handle any domestic matters that don't require the Duke's direct attention." She paused. "He won't make this easy, Isabel. You've challenged him on your first day, and Nathaniel doesn't forget challenges." "I didn't mean to disrespect him." "I know." Lady Catherine's smile was faint. "But you did it anyway. That's going to complicate things." She gestured toward a narrow corridor. "Mrs. Hill will be expecting you. Get settled. Tomorrow, we begin your training properly." Isabel followed the indicated path, relief and dread warring in her chest. She had a place to stay, work to do. A chance, however precarious. She also had a Duke who looked at her like she was something dangerous that needed watching. By the time she reached her small room, clean, sparse, infinitely better than the stables, exhaustion had caught up with her. She sank onto the narrow bed and let herself breathe. She'd defied a Duke on her first day in his house. She had no idea what he would ask of her next, but she knew with cold certainty that nothing here would be simple. Morning arrived too early. Isabel woke to Mrs. Hill knocking briskly on her door, already dressed, and clearly expecting Isabel to be the same. "You've exactly 30 minutes to wash and come downstairs," the housekeeper announced. "The staff takes breakfast at 6. You'll need to be there to observe routines before her ladyship begins your instruction." The household, Isabel quickly discovered, ran with military precision. The cook had been with the family for 20 years. The butler, Mr. Garrett, had served the previous Duke and viewed changes with open suspicion. The housemaids worked in efficient silence, and the footmen moved like synchronized shadows. Isabel felt like a disruption in a well-oiled machine. "You'll coordinate the daily schedules," Mrs. Hill explained, walking her through endless corridors. "Staff assignments, supply orders, correspondence with tradespeople. The previous governess managed it with grace. We expect the same." What she meant was clear. Don't embarrass us. Lady Catherine appeared mid-morning, pulling Isabel into the estate's library, a vast room lined with books and smelling of leather and old paper. "The work isn't difficult," she said, settling into a chair near the window, "but it requires organization and discretion. You'll need to learn quickly." She handed Isabel a leather-bound ledger. "Start here. Review last month's accounts. I want to know if you can identify inefficiencies." Isabel opened the book, scanning rows of neat figures. Household expenses, staff wages, supply purchases. It took her less than 10 minutes to spot 3 irregularities. Lady Catherine smiled. "Good. You have an eye for detail. That will serve you well." They worked through the morning, Lady Catherine explaining the delicate balance of managing a Duke's household, how to handle difficult staff, how to negotiate with suppliers without appearing desperate, how to maintain authority without cruelty. "You'll need to be firm," Lady Catherine said, "but fair. The staff respects competence above all else. Show them you're capable and they'll accept you." "And the Duke?" Isabel asked before she could stop herself. Lady Catherine's expression shifted, something sad and proud tangled together. "Nathaniel is complicated. His father's death changed him, made him harder, more suspicious." She looked out the window toward the estate's grounds. "He was always responsible, always aware of duty. But he used to laugh more, trust more easily. Now he sees threats everywhere. He thinks I'm a threat. He thinks everyone is a threat. That's the problem. Lady Catherine turned back to her. But he's not cruel, Isabel. He's protective of this estate, of his position, of me. He just doesn't know how to separate genuine need from manipulation anymore. Isabel thought of the cold fury in his eyes yesterday. What happened? With his father, I mean. A riding accident, 3 years ago. Lady Catherine's voice went distant. Sudden. Senseless. Nathaniel was in London when it happened, handling business matters. He arrived home to find his father already buried and vultures circling, trying to ingratiate themselves with the new duke before the grief had even settled. Her hands tightened in her lap. Men who'd ignored him before suddenly wanted to be his closest friends. Women who'd barely noticed him became brazenly forward. Everyone wanted something. So he learned to trust no one. Precisely. Isabel looked down at the ledger in her hands. Why did you help me? When you saw me in the village, you didn't know me. You had no reason to trust me either. Lady Catherine was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but firm. Because I've seen what happens when no one helps. I've seen women trapped in impossible situations with no way out. And I've learned that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is offer someone a second chance. She met Isabel's eyes. Nathaniel thinks that's naive. Sentimental charity with no practical foundation. But I've watched women I've helped go on to build real lives. That's not sentimentality. That's investment in human dignity. Something in Isabel's chest tightened painfully. He doesn't know about the others you've helped. He knows I've helped women before. He disapproves, but he tolerates it because he respects me. Lady Catherine stood, smoothing her skirts. What he doesn't understand yet is why it matters. But perhaps in time he will. The afternoon passed in practical training. Isabel learned which staff members reported to whom, which tradespeople could be trusted, which suppliers tried to overcharge. She memorized routines, schedules, protocols. She did not see the Duke. That evening, as she was reviewing correspondence in the small office adjacent to the library, she heard his voice in the hallway. Low, controlled, speaking with Mr. Garrett about estate business. Isabel forced herself to focus on the letters before her, but awareness prickled across her skin. She heard his footsteps approaching, then stopping just outside the office door. The silence stretched. She knew he was there, knew he was watching, but she didn't look up. Finally he spoke. You're still here. Isabel set down her pen carefully. Your mother gave me a position. I intend to fulfill it. For how long? He stepped into the doorway, not entering fully but close enough that she could see the sharp intelligence in his dark eyes. Until something better comes along? Until you've extracted whatever you came here for? I came here because I had nowhere else to go. She met his gaze steadily. If that makes me desperate rather than manipulative, I apologize for the inconvenience. His jaw tightened. Desperation makes people dangerous. So does suspicion. For a heartbeat, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or reluctant recognition. Then the cold mask returned. Mrs. Hill tells me you identified accounting irregularities this morning. 3 of them. The butcher's been overcharging for 6 months. The coal supplier's weights don't match the invoices. And someone's been purchasing fabric that never appears in the household inventory. That someone is my mother, he said flatly. She uses it for her charitable projects. Isabel blinked. Then it should be listed under charitable expenditures, not household supplies. Otherwise the accounts won't balance properly. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. You're already trying to reorganize my mother's bookkeeping. Brave or foolish, I can't decide which. Perhaps both. This time, the almost smile reached his eyes. Just barely. Just enough. Perhaps, he agreed. Then his expression shuttered again. Continue with your work, Miss Graves. If you last the week, we'll discuss a more permanent arrangement. He left without waiting for a response. Isabel stared at the empty doorway, her pulse beating too fast. If you last the week. She returned to the correspondence, hands steady, mind churning. She'd survived worse than a suspicious duke. She'd survived her stepfather's house, his cruelty, his control. This was nothing. This was just a man who'd been hurt, and didn't know how to heal. She could handle that, she had to. 3 days passed in careful choreography. Isabel woke early, worked late, and slowly began to earn the household staff's grudging respect. She caught mistakes before they became problems. She negotiated better terms with suppliers. She managed conflicts between servants with firm diplomacy. Lady Catherine watched with quiet approval. The Duke watched with guarded suspicion. On the 4th day, everything changed. Isabel was in the morning room coordinating the week's menus with Cook when Mr. Garrett appeared in the doorway with an expression she couldn't read. "Miss Graves, a letter arrived for you." Her stomach dropped. No one knew she was here. No one should be writing to her. She took the envelope with trembling fingers, recognizing the handwriting immediately. Her stepfather's script, harsh, angular, unmistakable. "Bad news?" Cook asked, frowning. "No, just unexpected." Isabel forced herself to smile. "Excuse me, I need to address this privately." She made it to her room before her hands started shaking in earnest. She didn't want to open it, didn't want to read whatever poison he'd written. But she had to know the letter was brief, brutal. "Isabel, you think you can run? You think some aristocratic woman's pity will protect you from what you are, from what you owe? I know where you are. I know whose house you're hiding in. You have 1 week to return, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of woman the Duke of Wycliffe has employed. Come home. Before I come for you. Robert Thorne." Isabel read it twice, feeling ice spread through her veins. He'd found her. Somehow he'd tracked her here, and he was threatening the Blackwoods, threatening their reputation. She couldn't stay. She had to leave before he made good on his threats, before he brought scandal to the people who'd shown her kindness. She was folding the letter when someone knocked. "Miss Graves?" Lady Catherine's voice gentle but concerned. "May I come in?" Isabel opened the door, trying to compose herself. Lady Catherine took one look at her face and stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "What happened?" Isabel's throat closed. "I need to leave. I'm sorry. I should never have come here. Let me see the letter." "No, it's not." "Isabel." Lady Catherine held out her hand, expression firm. "Let me see it." Isabel handed it over, defeat washing through her. She watched Lady Catherine read, watched her expression harden. "Robert Thorne," Lady Catherine said slowly. "Your stepfather." "Yes." "What does he want? Me gone? Or money? Or both?" "I don't know." Isabel wrapped her arms around herself. "I stole from him when I left. Enough for coach fare and a few weeks' survival. He wants restitution or revenge. With him, they're usually the same thing." Lady Catherine folded the letter precisely. "You're not leaving." "I have to. He'll ruin you. He'll spread lies about me, about why I'm here, Then we'll show him those lies won't work." Lady Catherine's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Men like Robert Thorne trade in intimidation. They rely on fear. The moment you run, you confirm his power over you. But your son, the Duke's reputation, will survive a groundless accusation from a cruel stepfather trying to reclaim his escaped victim." Lady Catherine met her eyes. "You're not the first woman I've helped, Isabel. I know how this works. We stand firm and he has nothing. He knows people. He can make things very difficult. So can I." Lady Catherine's smile was faint but fierce. "And more importantly, so can Nathaniel if he chooses to." "He won't." Isabel's voice cracked. "He already thinks I'm a threat. This will just confirm it. Then we'll change his mind." Lady Catherine took her hand, squeezing firmly. "Trust me. We're not giving up on you yet." But when Nathaniel learned about the letter, and he would because Lady Catherine told him everything, the conversation didn't go as Isabel had hoped. She wasn't present when it happened. She was in the office, trying to work, trying not to imagine packing her few belongings and disappearing into the night. But she heard the argument. Everyone heard it. "You can't be serious." The Duke's voice carried through the manor's walls with perfect clarity. "You're inviting scandal into this house deliberately. I'm protecting someone who needs protection." Lady Catherine's response was quieter, but no less firm. "She brought this on herself. She escaped a dangerous man. That's not bringing trouble, Nathaniel. That's surviving." And now he's threatening us, our reputation, our position. Do you understand what that means? I understand that you're letting fear make decisions for you. Silence. Terrible, heavy silence. Then, I want her gone by morning. Isabel closed her eyes, feeling the words like blows. She'd known. Of course she'd known. But hearing it still hurt. She didn't pack, didn't run. She simply sat in the office, staring at the correspondence she'd been organizing, and waited for the inevitable summons. It came an hour later. Mr. Garrett, expression carefully blank, informing her that the Duke requested her presence in his study. She went. What else could she do? Nathaniel stood at the window, back rigid. He didn't turn when she entered. Close the door, he said. She did. Tell me the truth. His voice was flat, controlled. All of it. What did you take from him? What does he actually want? Money, Isabel said quietly. £300 I stole from his desk. He used it to gamble, to drink. I used it to survive. So you're a thief. The word hung in the air like smoke. Isabel lifted her chin. Yes. I'm a thief who stole from a man who beat me, who tried to arrange a marriage to a 60-year-old merchant in exchange for settling his debts, who told me I was worthless every day of my life after my mother died. If that makes me irredeemable in your eyes, then send me away, but don't pretend the theft is the real issue. He finally turned. His face was unreadable. The real issue is that you brought danger to my house, to my mother, and you said nothing. Because I didn't think he could find me. I didn't think... Her voice broke. She forced it steady. I was wrong. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't protect us from scandal. I know. She met his eyes. That's why I'm leaving, tonight. He won't follow if I'm gone. Yes, he will. Nathaniel moved closer, frustration finally bleeding through his composure. Men like him don't stop. They escalate. You running just means he'll chase harder, threaten louder. Do you understand that? Then what do you want from me? Isabel's hands clenched at her sides. You want me gone? Fine, I'm going. You'll be safe. I want to know if I can trust you. The words came out harsh, raw. I want to know if you're using my mother's kindness as a shield, while you extract everything you can. I want to know if letting you stay means risking everything my father built, everything I'm responsible for protecting. The honesty of it, the fear beneath the anger made Isabel's chest tighten. I don't want anything from you, she said quietly. I just want to survive. That's all I've ever wanted. And your mother offered me a chance to do that with dignity instead of desperation. If that's not enough, if my presence here is too costly, then tell me and I'll go. But don't accuse me of manipulation when all I've done is try to be useful. They stared at each other across the study's expensive carpet. Isabel could see him calculating, weighing risks, trying to decide if she was worth the trouble. Finally, he looked away. You'll stay. For now. But... He held up a hand when she started to speak. One more problem. One more threat. One more hidden truth that explodes in my face. And you're gone. Understood? Understood. Good. He moved back to the window, dismissing her without another word. Close the door on your way out. Isabel left, relief and dread tangling in her stomach. She'd bought herself time, but the cost felt like a blade balanced above her head, waiting to fall. The week that followed was tense and strange. Robert Thorne sent no more letters, but his threat lingered like smoke. Isabel worked harder than ever, trying to prove she was worth the risk. The household accounts became immaculate. Supply orders arrived perfectly coordinated. Staff conflicts resolved before they became problems. Lady Catherine watched with quiet approval. The Duke watched with guarded calculation. And then on the 8th day something shifted. Isabel was in the servants' hall, mediating a dispute between two housemaids about schedules, when raised voices erupted from the entrance hall. She arrived to find Mrs. Hill arguing with a well-dressed woman who looked furious. I don't care what your policies are, the woman was saying coldly. My bracelet is missing, and the last person in my room was that girl. She pointed at young Sarah, one of the newer housemaids who looked pale and terrified. Lady Worthington, Mrs. Hill said firmly, I assure you, our staff are thoroughly vetted. Then perhaps you need better vetting. Check her quarters. I want my property returned immediately. Isabel stepped forward before she thought better of it. What happened? Lady Worthington's gaze raked over her dismissively. And who are you? Miss Graves, the estate's governess. Please explain what happened. I stayed the night as a guest of the Duke. This morning I discovered my gold bracelet missing from my bedside table. That girl, she pointed at Sarah again, was the last person in the room. Sarah was crying now, shaking her head mutely. Isabel looked at the young woman, barely 18, terrified, clearly guilty of nothing but bad timing. Sarah wouldn't steal, Isabel said calmly. She's been with us 3 months and has given no cause for concern. Then perhaps your standards are lacking. Isabel felt anger flare but kept her voice level. Or perhaps you misplaced your bracelet. These things happen. Are you calling me careless? I'm suggesting we search thoroughly before making accusations that could ruin a young woman's life. Lady Worthington's expression turned vicious. I don't take orders from servants. Miss Graves is correct, a cold voice said from the staircase. We'll search thoroughly before anyone is accused of anything. Everyone turned. The Duke descended the stairs slowly, expression unreadable. He looked at Sarah, then at Lady Worthington, then, briefly, almost imperceptibly, at Isabel. Mr. Garrett, search Lady Worthington's guest room completely. Miss Graves, check the laundry. Mrs. Hill, review yesterday's cleaning schedules. He turned to Lady Worthington. I trust you'll wait while we conduct a proper investigation. It wasn't a question. Lady Worthington's mouth thinned, but she nodded stiffly. The search took 20 minutes. They found the bracelet wedged behind the bedside table's baseboard, fallen, not stolen. Lady Worthington left without apologizing, clearly embarrassed but too proud to admit fault. Sarah dissolved into grateful tears. Mrs. Hill looked relieved. Isabel felt exhausted. She was returning to the office when the Duke appeared beside her in the corridor, silent as a ghost. That was well handled, he said quietly. Isabel glanced at him, surprised. I just didn't want an innocent girl punished for something she didn't do. Most people would have let Mrs. Hill handle it. Mrs. Hill was handling it, She stopped. I interfered. I'm sorry, I should have stayed back. He studied her face for a long moment. You defended someone who couldn't defend herself, against a woman with far more social power than you. That's either admirable or reckless. Can't it be both? This time he definitely smiled, small, fleeting, but real. It usually is. They stood in the corridor, silence stretching between them, but different now, less hostile, less cold. Thank you, Isabel said, for backing me up. You didn't have to. You were right. He looked uncomfortable admitting it. And Sarah deserved someone willing to fight for her. He paused. Even if that someone was you. Even if that someone was me, Isabel echoed, something in her chest loosening slightly. He left without another word, but Isabel stood in the corridor long after, feeling like something fundamental had just shifted. The days began to blur into something resembling routine. Isabel managed the household with increasing confidence. The staff grudgingly accepted her authority. Lady Catherine's training continued, covering everything from correspondence to crisis management. And Nathaniel watched, but differently now. She'd catch him observing her in doorways at dinner when she thought no one noticed. Not with suspicion, or not only suspicion. Something more complicated. Curious, maybe. Assessing. 2 weeks after the bracelet incident, he sought her out deliberately. She was in the library, reviewing household accounts by lamplight, well after the staff had retired. He appeared so quietly, she didn't hear him until he spoke. You work late. Isabel looked up, startled. He stood near the shelves, still dressed formally, looking tired in a way that made him seem almost human. The invoices needed reconciling, she said. I wanted to finish before tomorrow. My mother works you too hard. Your mother treats me like I'm capable of this work. That's not too hard, that's trust. He moved closer, studying the ledgers spread before her. You found more discrepancies. Just one. The wine merchant's been charging London prices for local vintage, probably hoping no one would notice. Most people wouldn't have. Most people don't need to justify their presence here every day. The words came out before she could stop them. Isabel closed her eyes. I'm sorry, that was... True? He sat in the chair across from her, expression unreadable. You think you need to prove yourself constantly, don't I? I don't know. He looked at her directly, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. Do you? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning she couldn't quite pass. Isabel set down her pen carefully. Your mother told me about your father, she said quietly, about what happened after he died, the people who tried to use you. His expression shuttered immediately. My mother speaks too freely. She worries about you. She sees the best in people. That's a luxury I can't afford. He stood abruptly. It's late, you should rest. But he didn't leave. He stood there, tension radiating from him, looking like he wanted to say something more. I don't want anything from you, Isabel said. I know you don't believe that, but it's true. Everyone wants something. Maybe, but what I want is already here, a place that's safe, work that matters, people who don't treat me like I'm worthless. She met his eyes. If that's too much to ask, tell me now. I'm tired of waiting for the other shoe to drop. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, some of the tension drained from his shoulders. I don't know if I can trust you, he said, but I'm beginning to think that might not be your fault. It was the closest thing to an apology she'd ever get from him. Isabel felt something warm bloom in her chest. That's a start, she said softly. It's more than I've offered anyone in 3 years. He moved toward the door, then paused. The invoices you corrected, send them to Mr. Garrett tomorrow. I'll want a full accounting of what we've overpaid. He looked back at her. Good work, Miss Graves. He left before she could respond. Isabel sat alone in the lamplit library, staring at the empty doorway, feeling like she'd just won a battle she hadn't known she was fighting. The intimacy, such as it was, didn't last. 3 days later, another letter arrived. This one came directly to the Duke, not Isabel. She knew because she heard the glass shatter in his study, heard his voice loud and furious, calling for Mr. Garrett. She was summoned 30 minutes later. Lady Catherine stood in the study beside her son, face pale but composed. Nathaniel looked like murder barely restrained. Explain this, he said, throwing papers onto the desk. Isabel picked them up with shaking hands, her stepfather's handwriting again, but this time addressed to the Duke directly. Your Grace, I write to inform you of the true nature of the woman you've employed. Miss Isabel Graves is not the victim she claims. She is a thief, a liar, and a woman of highly questionable virtue. Before fleeing my household, she was involved in several incidents of moral impropriety that I, as her guardian, attempted to correct. I have evidence of these indiscretions. Unless she returns to my care, or suitable restitution is made, I will be forced to share this information with your peers. I'm sure you understand the delicacy of the situation. The letter went on, detailing supposed scandals that were pure fabrication, meetings with men in secret, inappropriate behavior with tradesmen, theft from multiple households, all lies, vicious, calculated lies designed to destroy her. None of this is true, Isabel said, voice shaking. He's lying, all of it, every word. Of course he's lying, Lady Catherine said firmly. Nathaniel, you can't possibly— What I can't do, Nathaniel said, voice like ice, is ignore a direct threat to this family's reputation. He's given me an ultimatum, return her or face scandal. So you're going to send her back? Lady Catherine's voice was disbelieving. To a man who abused her. I'm going to protect what's mine. Nathaniel looked at Isabel, and the betrayal in his eyes hurt more than she expected. You told me one more problem, one more hidden truth. This letter describes incidents you never mentioned. Because they didn't happen. Isabel's control cracked. He's inventing scandals to force me back or destroy me. That's what he does. He lies until people believe him. Then why didn't you warn me this was possible? Because I didn't think, she stopped. I didn't know he'd go this far. You didn't know. Nathaniel's laugh was bitter. You didn't think. How many more things don't you know, Miss Graves? How many more surprises should I prepare for? That's unfair, Lady Catherine said sharply. She's not responsible for his cruelty. She's responsible for bringing it to our door. He turned away. I want her gone, today. Give her funds for travel, a reference if you must. But I want her out of this house before nightfall. The words struck like physical blows. Isabel felt tears burning but refused to let them fall. "No," Lady Catherine said. Nathaniel turned slowly. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Lady Catherine stepped forward. "I won't send her back to that man. I won't abandon her because you're afraid. This isn't about fear. It's entirely about fear." Lady Catherine's voice was steel. "You're so terrified of being used again that you can't see genuine need when it's standing in front of you. You're so determined to protect yourself that you've become exactly what you claim to hate. Someone who sees people as threats instead of human beings." The silence that followed felt like the air before a storm. "Mother." "I'm not finished." Lady Catherine turned to Isabel. "I need you to leave the room, please. Give us privacy." Isabel fled, tears finally spilling free as she ran to her quarters. She could hear the argument continuing, muffled voices rising and falling behind closed doors. She began packing mechanically. A few dresses, the coins Lady Catherine had paid her, the letter from her stepfather, evidence, however damning. She had nowhere to go. But she couldn't stay where she wasn't wanted, where her presence threatened people who'd shown her kindness. She was nearly finished when someone knocked. Lady Catherine entered without waiting, face composed but eyes bright. "Stop packing," she said firmly. "I can't stay." "Yes, you can." "Because I'm not letting you leave, and neither is my son." Isabel stared. "But he said he's been overruled." Lady Catherine sat on the bed, patting the space beside her. "Sit. Listen." Isabel sat, hardly daring to hope. "Nathaniel is hiring investigators," Lady Catherine said. "Discreet ones. They'll look into your stepfather's claims, gather evidence of his actual character. It will take time, but we'll have documentation proving these accusations are false." "Why would he do that?" "Because I reminded him that his father would be ashamed of who he's becoming, and because, despite his suspicions, he knows you don't deserve to be sacrificed to a cruel man's lies." Lady Catherine took her hand. "He's not sending you away, Isabel. He's protecting you. He just doesn't know how to admit that yet." Tears spilled over. Isabel couldn't stop them. "He hates me. He's terrified of you." "There's a difference." Lady Catherine squeezed her hand. "You make him feel things he thought he'd buried. That's dangerous for a man who spent 3 years building walls. But it's not hate. Trust me." Isabel wanted to believe it. Desperately, foolishly, she wanted it to be true. "What do I do now?" "You continue working. You hold your head high. You let the investigators do their job." Lady Catherine stood. "And you don't let Robert Thorne win." "Understood?" Isabel nodded, throat too tight for words. That evening, the Duke didn't speak to her, didn't acknowledge her presence at all. But when she passed his study, she saw him at his desk, writing letters with sharp, decisive strokes, reaching out to contacts, calling in favors, building the case that would protect her, even if he couldn't admit why it mattered. The investigation took 2 weeks, 2 weeks of careful tension, of Robert Thorne sending increasingly desperate threats, of Nathaniel working long hours behind closed doors. Isabel continued her duties, but the ease between them had shattered. The Duke avoided her. When they had to interact, his manner was coldly professional. It hurt, more than she wanted to admit. Lady Catherine tried to bridge the gap, but even her efforts fell flat. Nathaniel had retreated into himself, back behind the walls Isabel had briefly seen him lower. She told herself it didn't matter, that she didn't care if he trusted her or not. She told herself a lot of lies during those 2 weeks. On the 15th day, Nathaniel called her to his study. She went with dread pooling in her stomach. He stood by the window, back rigid. On his desk sat a folder of documents. "The investigation is complete," he said without preamble. "Your stepfather is a documented liar, gambler, and debtor. He's made similar accusations against 2 other women in the past, both proven false. He has no evidence for any of his claims about you." Relief crashed through her. So you're safe. The investigators have compiled everything needed to discredit him publicly if he tries to spread these rumors." Nathaniel finally turned. His expression was carefully blank. "You can stay, Miss Graves, if you wish." "If I wish," Isabel repeated slowly. "That's very generous. But what do you wish, Your Grace? Do you want me to stay? Or are you tolerating my presence because your mother insists? What I want is irrelevant. How convenient for you." Anger surged, sudden, sharp, freeing. "You get to remain distant and suspicious while still appearing noble. You get to protect me without actually trusting me. Perfect." His jaw tightened. "I hired investigators. I spent 2 weeks gathering evidence to keep you safe. To keep yourself safe." Isabel stepped closer. "You didn't do this for me. You did it because you couldn't stand the thought of Robert Thorne winning. You did it because sending me back would make you like the people you hate, the ones who use people and discard them." She stopped directly in front of him. "But you still don't trust me. You still think I'm here for something other than survival." "I think you're dangerous," he said quietly. "Not because you're dishonest, because you make me want things I can't afford to want." The honesty of it stole her breath. "What things?" The question came out, barely a whisper. "Connection. Trust." His voice was raw. "Someone who sees me as something other than a title and an estate. I can't want that, Miss Graves. I can't risk it. Do you understand? Everyone who gets close has an agenda. Everyone." "Not everyone." Isabel held his gaze. "Not me. How can I know that?" "You can't." She stepped back, something breaking loose in her chest. "That's the whole point. Trust doesn't come with guarantees. You either choose to believe someone or you don't. And you've already decided you don't. Not really. So thank you for the investigation. Thank you for keeping me safe. But don't pretend this is about anything other than duty." She left before he could respond, left him standing alone in his study with his walls intact and his heart carefully locked away. She didn't cry. She'd wasted enough tears on men who couldn't see past their own fear. 3 days passed in cold silence. Isabel worked. Nathaniel avoided her. Lady Catherine watched with worried eyes but didn't interfere. Then, on the 4th night, everything changed again. Isabel was in the library. Her refuge now, the place she went when the small room felt too claustrophobic, reading by lamplight. She heard footsteps but didn't look up, assuming it was a servant checking the lamps. "I owe you an apology." She looked up sharply. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, still dressed for evening but disheveled in a way she'd never seen. His cravat was loosened, hair mussed like he'd been running his hands through it. "You don't owe me anything," Isabel said carefully. "I do." He moved into the room but kept his distance. "You were right. I hired the investigators to protect myself, not you. I couldn't stand the thought of Robert Thorne winning, of him having power over my household. That's not the same as protecting you because I care about you as a person." Isabel set her book down slowly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because my mother said something tonight that I can't stop thinking about." He looked at her directly. "She said my father would have hired the investigators on the first day, would have believed you immediately, would have seen you as someone worth protecting simply because you needed protection, not because it served his interests. Your father sounds like a good man." "He was." Nathaniel's voice cracked slightly. "And I've spent 3 years trying to be nothing like him, because being like him meant trusting people who betrayed that trust. I thought I was protecting his legacy, but I've just been hiding." The vulnerability in his admission made Isabel's chest ache. She stood slowly, moving closer. "You're not hiding anymore," she said softly. "I don't know how to do this." He looked at her like she was something precious and terrifying. "I don't know how to let someone in without waiting for them to hurt me. I don't know how to trust that you'll stay." "I can't promise I won't hurt you," Isabel said honestly. "No one can promise that, but I can promise I'm not here for your title or your estate or anything except a chance at a life that's mine. That's all I've ever wanted." He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and touched her face, fingertips brushing her cheekbone so gently she almost didn't feel it. "Tell me about him," he said quietly. "Your stepfather. The real story." So she did. There in the lamplit library, she told him everything. About her mother's death when she was 16. About Robert Thorne marrying into the family for her mother's small inheritance. About the years of cruelty that followed. Emotional abuse that never left marks but hollowed her out from the inside. She told him about the merchant Robert tried to sell her to. About stealing the money. About running. Nathaniel listened without interrupting. his hand still resting against her face like he needed the contact to stay grounded. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for not believing you, for making you prove yourself over and over. His voice broke, "for almost sending you back to that. You didn't send me back. I wanted to." The admission cost him. I was so afraid of being used again that I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Someone who needed help, someone who deserved it. "Your mother saw it. My mother is wiser than I'll ever be." He stepped closer, hand sliding from her face to rest against the curve of her neck. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to be the person you deserve." "I don't need you to be perfect," Isabel said, her own hand coming up to rest against his chest. She could feel his heart racing. "I just need you to try." "I can do that." His thumb brushed the pulse point in her throat. "If you'll let me, Nathaniel." He kissed her, soft, tentative, asking permission with every movement. Isabel's breath caught. Then she was kissing him back, hands fisting in his shirt, 3 weeks of tension finally breaking free. It wasn't desperate, wasn't wild. It was careful and deliberate and achingly honest, two people trying to figure out how to trust each other, despite every reason not to. The kiss broke softly, and Nathaniel kept close, forehead pressed to hers. "Stay," he whispered, "not as a governess, not as someone we're helping, just stay." "For how long?" "As long as you want." His arms wrapped around her, holding her close. "As long as you'll have me." Isabel closed her eyes, feeling safe for the first time in years. "That might be a very long time." "Good." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Because I'm done being afraid of this, of you, of what we could be." "What could we be?" "I don't know." He smiled, real, warm, nothing hidden. "But I'd like to find out. If you're willing." Isabel kissed him again, softer this time. "A promise. I'm willing." They stood in the library long into the night, holding each other, talking quietly, learning how to be honest without armor. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a beginning. The next morning brought a new crisis. Isabel woke to raised voices outside her door. She dressed quickly and emerged to find Mrs. Hill and 2 footmen clustered in the hallway, looking agitated. "What's happening?" "Message from the village, miss." Mrs. Hill looked pale. "Your stepfather's there, spreading rumors at the tavern about you and the Duke, saying terrible things." Isabel's stomach dropped. "What kind of things?" "That you seduced his grace, that the whole household is involved in covering up your immoral behavior, that Lady Catherine is—" Mrs. Hill stopped, clearly unable to repeat the rest. Nathaniel appeared at the end of the hall, already dressed for riding, face set in grim lines. "I heard. We're going to the village. Now, Your Grace." "That's exactly what he wants." "I don't care what he wants." Nathaniel looked at Isabel. "Get dressed for travel. You're coming with me." "That's not wise. I'm done hiding you away like you're something to be ashamed of." He held her gaze. "We're settling this. Today, together." 30 minutes later, they rode to the village in the Duke's carriage, Nathaniel, Isabel, and Lady Catherine. The tension was thick enough to cut. "He's baiting you," Lady Catherine said quietly. "He wants a public confrontation. Then he'll get one." Nathaniel's jaw was set, but not the way he expects. They arrived to find a small crowd gathered outside the tavern. Robert Thorne stood in the center, well-dressed and playing the wronged guardian perfectly. "Refuse to see reason," he was saying as they approached. "I only wanted to protect her, to bring her home safely. Instead, she's been living in that house under questionable circumstances." "Mr. Thorne." Nathaniel's voice cut through the growing murmurs. The crowd parted immediately. Robert turned, satisfaction flickering across his face before he masked it with concern. "Your Grace, thank goodness. Perhaps you can help me understand why my stepdaughter is under my protection because you're a documented liar, abuser, and debtor." Nathaniel's voice was cold, clear, carrying easily. "I have investigators' reports detailing your gambling debts, your history of making false accusations, and witness testimony about your treatment of Miss Graves." Robert's expression shifted. calculation replacing false concern. Gossip from disgruntled, legal documentation. Nathaniel gestured, and Mr. Garrett appeared with the folder of evidence. Everything you've claimed about Miss Graves is provably false. Everything she's claimed about you is provably true, so I'm going to make this very simple. The crowd had gone silent. Isabel stood frozen beside the carriage, watching Nathaniel transform from the guarded, suspicious man she'd known into something fierce and certain. You have two choices, Nathaniel continued. You can leave this village immediately, return to wherever you came from and never contact Miss Graves again. Or you can continue spreading lies, and I will ensure every magistrate, every creditor, every person you've ever wronged knows exactly what you are. I will make your name so toxic that no one will hire you, trust you, or offer you credit for the rest of your miserable life. Robert's face went red. You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening. Nathaniel stepped closer, voice dropping to something deadly. I'm promising. You came here to destroy an innocent woman's reputation because she escaped your abuse. That ends now. You leave, or I destroy you. Choose. The silence stretched. Robert looked at the crowd, saw no sympathy, no support, saw only people backing away from him. This isn't over, he said, voice shaking with fury. Yes, Nathaniel said quietly. It is. Robert Thorne left, slinking away like the coward he was. The crowd dispersed slowly, whispers starting, but not, Isabel noticed, aimed at her with malice, more with curiosity, surprise. Nathaniel turned to face the remaining villagers, and then, deliberately, he held out his hand to Isabel. She stared at it, at him, at the public declaration of support he was offering. Miss Graves, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, is under the protection of the Blackwood family. Not as an employee, as someone we value, someone we trust. Anyone who questions that is questioning me. Is that understood? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Isabel took his hand, feeling her entire world shift on its axis. They rode back to the estate in silence, but Nathaniel didn't release her hand. Not in the carriage, not when they arrived home. Not until they were safely inside, away from watching eyes. Then he pulled her into his study and closed the door. You didn't have to do that, Isabel said, still shaking slightly. You've given him exactly what he wanted, a public scene. No. I gave you what you deserved. Public validation, public protection. He cupped her face in both hands. I'm done pretending you're just someone my mother took pity on. I'm done acting like you don't matter to me. Nathaniel, I know this is fast. I know we've only just started to trust each other, but I need you to understand something. His eyes searched hers. When I saw you standing there, listening to him destroy you with lies, and I knew I had the power to stop it, I realized I would have done anything, risked anything, just to keep you safe. Tears burned in Isabel's eyes. You already did. Not because it was convenient. Not because my mother asked. Because the thought of him hurting you made me want to burn the world down. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, soft, reverent touches. Stay. Not as a governess. Not as someone we're protecting. Stay because this is where you belong. With me, if you want that. I want that, Isabel whispered. But I don't know what that means. What we are. What? Neither do I. He smiled against her mouth. But we have time to figure it out. The days that followed felt surreal. Robert Thorne disappeared completely. Whether from shame or fear, Isabel didn't know and didn't care. The village gossip settled into acceptance. The household staff treated her with a new kind of respect, not as the governess, but as someone under the Duke's personal favor. Lady Catherine watched it all with quiet satisfaction and didn't interfere. But the change in Nathaniel was the most profound. The walls came down slowly, but they came down. He sought her out in the evenings, asked her opinions on estate matters, told her stories about his father, good memories instead of grief-shadowed ones. They didn't rush, didn't make grand declarations, just learned each other in quiet moments, stolen between duties and responsibilities. 3 weeks after the confrontation, Isabel was working late in the office when Nathaniel appeared with 2 glasses of wine. You've been staring at those accounts for 2 hours, he said, setting 1 glass beside her. Take a break. I'm almost finished, Isabel. He waited until she looked at him. Break. She took the wine, smiling. When did you become so bossy? I've always been bossy. You just didn't let me get away with it. He leaned against the desk. My mother wants to host a dinner party next week. Several local families. She's trying to re-establish normalcy after the incident. That sounds political. Everything my mother does is political, but she also wants to formally introduce you to society. Not as the governess, as... He stopped, looking uncertain. As family. Isabel's breath caught. Nathaniel, I know it's fast. I know people will talk. But I don't care anymore. He set down his wine and took her hands. I've spent 3 years being careful, being suspicious, protecting myself from everyone who might want something from me. And I was miserable, completely, utterly miserable. And now? Now I'm terrified, he admitted, because I care about you more than I've cared about anyone since my father died, and that means you could hurt me in ways no one else can. But, his grip tightened, but I'd rather risk that pain than go back to being the person I was before you walked into that study and refused to leave. Tears spilled down Isabel's cheeks. I'm terrified too. I spent so many years just trying to survive, never imagining I could have something like this, someone like you. And now that I do, I keep waiting for it to disappear. It won't disappear. He pulled her up, wrapping his arms around her. I promise you, Isabel, whatever this becomes, whatever we become, I'm not walking away. Not unless you ask me to. I won't ask. Then we're both stuck. He kissed her, deep and thorough, until the world narrowed to just the two of them. Will you come to the dinner? Let my mother show everyone that you're important to this family. Yes. She kissed him back. On one condition. Anything. Stop calling it fast. We've known each other 2 months. We've survived a stepfather's threats, public scandal, and your deeply ingrained trust issues. If anything, we're moving slowly. He laughed. Genuine, unguarded, beautiful. You're right. We're practically ancient, practically decrepit. They stood in the office, holding each other, and Isabel thought about the girl who'd fled her stepfather's house with stolen coins and terror, about the woman she was becoming, someone brave enough to demand respect, skilled enough to earn it, and loved enough to believe she deserved it. The dinner party was exactly as political as Nathaniel predicted. Lady Catherine invited carefully selected families, ones with influence, but also known for being fair-minded. She introduced Isabel as a dear friend of the family, and watched with satisfaction as the guests accepted the fiction without question. Nathaniel stayed close to Isabel all evening, a silent statement of protection and preference. When Lady Ashford asked pointed questions about Isabel's family, he deflected smoothly. When Lord Worthington's wife made a veiled comment about appropriate connections, Nathaniel simply said, Miss Graves has proven herself invaluable to this household. We're fortunate to know her. The message was clear. Challenge Isabel, challenge him. No one challenged. By evening's end, Isabel had received 3 dinner invitations, 2 requests for advice on household management, and 1 very awkward proposal from Lady Ashford's nephew that Nathaniel intercepted with barely concealed irritation. He's 22, Nathaniel muttered as the guests departed, and has the intelligence of a horse. Are you jealous? Isabel teased. Absolutely not. He scowled. Horses are quite intelligent. Lady Catherine laughed. You two are incorrigible. The evening was a success, and you know it. She was right. The evening had been a success. Isabel had been accepted. Not fully, not without reservation, but accepted nonetheless. It felt like breathing after years underwater. Another month passed. Spring arrived properly, bringing warmth and new growth. The estate flourished under combined management. Nathaniel handling business matters, Lady Catherine overseeing social obligations, and Isabel coordinating everything that kept the household running smoothly. They were a team, a family. And late at night, when the house slept, Nathaniel and Isabel found each other in stolen moments of intimacy that never quite crossed into impropriety, but came breathtakingly close. We should probably stop meeting like this, Isabel murmured one night, curled against him in the library's reading nook. People will talk. Let them talk. Nathaniel's fingers traced patterns on her arm. I'm past caring what people think. That's a dangerous attitude for a duke. I'm learning to be dangerous in the right ways. He kissed her temple. You've taught me that some risks are worth taking. Have I? You risk everything every day. Your pride, your safety, your heart. You do it without hesitation because you believe people are worth the risk. Even people like me, suspicious, damaged, impossible. You're not impossible. I was, before you. He shifted to look at her directly. Isabel, I need to ask you something. Her heart stuttered. All right. The dinner party last month, Lady Catherine introducing you as family, the village accepting you, the household treating you like you belong here. His voice was careful, measured. Has it been enough? Is this life, this liminal space where you're not quite staff but not quite family, is it what you want? Isabel sat up slowly, searching his face. What are you asking? I'm asking if you're happy, if this arrangement is sustainable, or if... He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. If you need something more, something clearer. What I need, Isabel said carefully, is to know what you want. Because I can't read your mind, Nathaniel. I don't know if you're offering me a permanent position as glorified governess or... I'm offering you everything. The words came out raw, desperate. I'm offering you my trust, my home, my future. I'm offering you myself, however broken and insufficient that might be. But I need to know if that's enough, if I'm enough. Tears burned in Isabel's eyes. You're more than enough. You're everything I never let myself want, because I didn't think I deserved it. You deserve everything. He pulled her close again. And I'm going to spend however long it takes proving that to you, if you'll let me. How long are we talking? How does forever sound? Ambitious. She kissed him softly. But I like ambitious. They fell asleep there, tangled together. And when Mrs. Hill found them in the morning, she simply draped a blanket over them and continued with her duties. The household had learned not to question the Duke's choices, especially when those choices made him happier than they'd seen him in years. 3 months after Robert Thorne's humiliating departure, Lady Catherine called Isabel to her private sitting room. "Close the door," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "I want to show you something." She pulled out a wooden box, small, ornate, locked with a brass key she wore around her neck. Inside were letters, dozens of them. "These are from women I've helped over the years," Lady Catherine said softly. 23 women spanning 15 years. Some were fleeing abusive husbands, others were escaping controlling families, dangerous guardians, impossible situations. She handed Isabel a letter. "Read this one." Isabel read about a woman who'd escaped with her children, found work as a seamstress, eventually opened her own shop. The letter was full of gratitude and hope. And this one. Another letter. A woman who'd become a governess, then married well, now had 3 children and a happy life. Letter after letter, story after story, women who'd survived because someone had given them a chance. "You saved them," Isabel whispered. "I gave them time and resources. They saved themselves." Lady Catherine's eyes glistened. "My husband, Nathaniel's father, he understood. He helped me do this quietly, without drawing attention. When he died, I worried I'd have to stop, that Nathaniel would forbid it. But he didn't. He tolerated it, barely. He thought it was naive charity, helping strangers who might betray us." Lady Catherine looked at Isabel directly. "Then you arrived, and he learned what I've always known. Sometimes the most practical thing you can do is save someone who needs saving, because you never know what they'll become." Isabel's throat tightened. "What did I become? Someone my son loves. Someone who reminded him how to trust. Someone who proved that taking a chance on people isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing you can do." Lady Catherine took her hand. "Thank you for that, for giving him back himself. I didn't do anything. You were honest, you were brave. You stayed when it would have been easier to run. That's everything, Isabel, don't diminish it." They sat together, looking through letters from women who'd rebuilt their lives, and Isabel understood. She was part of a lineage of survival, part of a quiet revolution happening in drawing rooms and country estates, one woman at a time. "Does society know," Isabel asked, "about what you do?" No, and they won't. This work requires discretion. Lady Catherine's smile was soft. But you know. And Nathaniel knows. And the women I've helped know. That's enough. Later that evening, Isabel told Nathaniel about the letters, about the 23 women his mother had saved. They were in his study, sitting before the fire. He listened without interrupting, his expression shifting from surprise to something like awe. I was wrong, he said quietly, about my mother's charity. I thought it was sentiment without purpose, but it's the most purposeful thing anyone could do, giving people their lives back. She learned it from your father. My father believed in second chances. I'd forgotten that. He stared into the fire. After he died, everyone wanted something from me. And I started thinking everyone who needed help was just another person with an agenda. I lost sight of the difference between genuine need and manipulation. You found your way back. You showed me the way back. He pulled her closer. You and my mother. You both refused to let me become someone small and suspicious and cruel. You were never cruel. I was cruel to you, multiple times. I accused you of lying, of using us. I almost sent you back to a man who would have destroyed you. His voice was tight with remembered shame. I don't know how you forgave that. Because you changed. Because you chose to believe me even when it was hard. Because... She cupped his face. Because everyone deserves second chances, even suspicious dukes. He kissed her desperately, and they lost themselves in each other the way they'd been doing more and more frequently, careful to maintain propriety but only barely. Isabel, he said when they finally broke apart, I can't keep doing this. Her heart stopped. What? This liminal space where you're mine but not officially, where I have to watch my words, guard my actions, pretend I don't want to marry you so badly I can barely think straight. The world tilted. Nathaniel? Not yet. He pressed a finger to her lips. Not like this. Not in my study after midnight when we're both exhausted and you're wearing your work dress. When I ask you properly, it's going to be different. Better. The way you deserve. When you ask, Isabel repeated, dazed. Not if. Definitely when. He kissed her forehead. I'm just waiting for the right moment, so be patient with me. Can you do that? I can be patient. Liar. But he smiled. I love that about you. You're terrible at patience. You love me? The words came out small, wondering. Desperately. Completely. Probably unwisely, given that you're far too good for me. That's not true. It is. But I'm too selfish to care. He stood, pulling her up with him. Go to bed, Isabel, before I forget myself entirely and scandalize the household. She went, heart singing, mind reeling with possibility. The right moment came 2 weeks later, in the most unexpected way. Isabel was in the garden, cutting flowers for the drawing room, when she heard shouting from the stables. She arrived to find chaos. A horse had spooked, knocked over a groom, and was now loose in the courtyard. Stay back, Nathaniel ordered, appearing from nowhere. He approached the frightened animal carefully, voice low and soothing. It took 20 minutes, but he calmed the horse, got it secured, checked on the injured groom. Throughout it all, he was competent, careful, exactly the kind of leader his father had been. Isabel watched and felt her heart overflow. Afterward, when the crisis was resolved and the groom was being tended by the household's physician, Nathaniel found her still standing in the courtyard. You should have gone inside, he said, though he didn't sound upset. It was dangerous. I wanted to see you work. She smiled. You're good at this. Being a duke, taking care of people. I don't think you give yourself enough credit. I'm learning. He took her hand. I have a good teacher. Your father. You. He looked at their joined hands. You've taught me that leadership isn't about suspicion or control. It's about trust, about believing people will rise to meet your expectations if you give them the chance. That's a very generous interpretation of me not following orders. That's an accurate description of you changing my entire worldview. He tugged her toward the garden path. Walk with me? They walked in comfortable silence until they reached the rose garden, the estate's crown jewel, carefully maintained for generations. My father proposed to my mother here, Nathaniel said quietly. In this exact spot. May, just like now, roses in full bloom. Isabel's breath caught. Nathaniel, I grew up hearing the story, how he'd planned this elaborate speech, but forgot everything the moment he saw her. How he just blurted out, "Marry me," and she laughed and said yes before he could panic and take it back. He turned to face her. I always thought I'd propose differently, more elegantly, with proper planning and a perfect speech. And now I realize my father had the right idea. He took both her hands. Isabel Graves, I'm not good with words. I'm not good with trust. I spent 3 years building walls and suspecting everyone, and making myself miserable because it felt safer than risking my heart. Nathaniel, you don't have to. Then you walked into my study and refused to leave until you'd finished speaking. You defied me, challenged me, made me furious and confused and more alive than I'd felt in years. His grip tightened. You taught me that bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to trust despite the fear. You showed me that people are worth the risk, that love is worth the risk. Tears spilled down Isabel's cheeks. You said love. I said love. He smiled, nervous and hopeful. Because I do love you. Completely. Possibly unwisely. It's not unwise. It feels unwise when I'm this terrified of you saying no. He took a shaky breath. Isabel, I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other 5 months. I know there are proper ways to do this. Asking permission, securing settlements, all the aristocratic nonsense that doesn't actually matter. But none of that changes what I want, what I need. What do you need? You, here, always. Not as someone we're protecting. Not as an employee or a project. As my wife, as my partner. As the person who makes me believe I can be better than I am. He pulled her closer. Marry me. Please. If you'll have me. The world narrowed to his face. Vulnerable, hopeful, terrified in the most beautiful way. Yes, Isabel said. Yes, of course yes. He kissed her before the word fully left her mouth. Deep, claiming, joyful. When they broke apart, both were crying and laughing and holding each other like they'd never let go. I don't have a ring, Nathaniel said, laughing shakily. My mother's been after me for weeks to choose one, but I kept saying it wasn't time yet. I don't need a ring. You need a ring. You need 50 rings, you need everything. He cupped her face. You need to know that I'm choosing you, publicly, permanently, irrevocably. You're going to be a duchess, Isabel. Do you understand what that means? It means I'll have to learn proper forms of address. It means society will dissect every part of your history, your family, your past. Robert Thorne might rear his ugly head again. Then we'll face it together. She pressed her hands over his. I'm not afraid of society's judgment anymore. I'm not afraid of my past, because I have you, and that's enough. You're remarkable. He kissed her again, softer this time. My father would have loved you. He would have said you're exactly what this family needs, someone who reminds us what actually matters. What matters? People over position, integrity over image, love over fear. He rested his forehead against hers. You taught me all of that, by being exactly who you are. They stood in the rose garden, holding each other, and Isabel thought about the journey that had brought her here, from her stepfather's house, to the stables, to this garden, from survival, to safety, to love. She'd defied a duke on her first day in his house. She'd never imagined he would ask her to be his wife, but here they were, choosing each other despite fear, despite scandal, despite every reason to play it safe. Here they were, brave enough to trust. The announcement caused exactly the scandal Nathaniel predicted. Society buzzed with gossip about the mysterious Miss Graves who'd captured the Duke of Wycliffe's heart. Speculation ran wild about her background, her family, her intentions. Lady Catherine handled it with graceful steel, hosting tea parties where she made it clear anyone who questioned Isabel's integrity would answer to the Blackwood family. The gossip died down gradually, replaced by cautious acceptance. Robert Thorne tried one last desperate move, a letter to a London scandal sheet, alleging impropriety. Nathaniel responded by having his solicitors deliver a comprehensive packet of evidence proving Robert's history of lies, along with a promise of legal action if the publication printed anything based on his claims. The letter never appeared in print. Robert Thorne disappeared from public consciousness entirely. The wedding took place 3 months later in the estate's chapel. Small, intimate, nothing like the grand aristocratic spectacle society expected. Just family, close friends and staff who'd become like family. Isabel wore a simple gown in cream silk. Lady Catherine cried through the entire ceremony. Nathaniel's hands shook when he placed the ring on Isabel's finger. When the vicar pronounced them married, Nathaniel kissed her like they were the only 2 people in the world. They were starting a new chapter. Together. Epilogue. 6 months of marriage had not diminished the wonder of waking up beside him. Isabel lay in bed, watching early morning light filter through curtains, listening to Nathaniel's steady breathing. The Duchess of Wycliffe, she thought with amusement. It still felt surreal, but right. You're thinking too loudly, Nathaniel mumbled, eyes still closed. It's uncivilized. I'm thinking about how lucky I am. I'm the lucky one. He pulled her closer without opening his eyes. You married a suspicious, emotionally constipated duke who spent your entire courtship being terrible at expressing feelings. You got better because you wouldn't let me be anything less. He finally opened his eyes, smiling sleepily. What are you really thinking about? Your mother, the women she's helped. They'd continued Lady Catherine's work, carefully and quietly. 2 more women had found refuge at the estate in the past 6 months. One was already training for a position with another household. The other was learning to be a seamstress. Nathaniel had gone from tolerating his mother's sentimental charity to actively supporting it. I was wrong about so many things, he said now, reading her thoughts. About trust, about vulnerability, about what it means to protect people, not by shutting them out, but by giving them the tools to protect themselves. Your father knew that. My father would be proud of what we're building here, what you're building. He kissed her temple. A safe place for people who need second chances, just like you needed. Just like you needed, Isabel corrected softly. You gave yourself a second chance when you chose to trust me. That was brave. It was terrifying. The best things usually are. They lay together in comfortable silence until duty inevitably called. The estate wouldn't manage itself, and they both had work to do. But they did it together now, partners in every sense. That afternoon, Lady Catherine found them in the library, reviewing household accounts side by side. Working on a Sunday, she said, though her tone was fond. You 2 are incorrigible. These are last quarter's expenditures for the charitable fund, Nathaniel explained. We're allocating more resources. Isabel suggested expanding beyond just emergency assistance to include education and job training. Lady Catherine smiled, eyes bright. My husband tried to implement something similar years ago. He said giving people fish is kind, but teaching them to fish changes everything. He was right, Isabel said. We've been documenting outcomes, what happens to the women after they leave here. Almost all of them are thriving. They just needed time and support. That's more than charity, Lady Catherine said softly. That's investment in human potential. She sat across from them, expression turning serious. I never told you this, Nathaniel, but when your father died I was terrified you'd shut this down, that you'd see it as frivolous or dangerous. I almost did, he admitted. I was so focused on protecting what we had that I couldn't see the value in giving it away. And now? Now I see that protecting what matters means protecting people, not just property or reputation. He looked at Isabel. She taught me that. Every day she teaches me that. You taught each other, Lady Catherine said. That's what partnership is, mutual transformation. She pulled out an envelope. Speaking of which, this arrived today. From Sarah, the housemaid you defended against Lady Worthington's false accusation. Isabel opened it, reading aloud. Sarah had secured a position with another household, one that valued her skills and treated her with respect. She'd saved enough to send money home to her family. She was happy. You changed her life, Lady Catherine said, by standing up for her when it would have been easier to stay silent. I just did what was right. That's never just anything. Lady Catherine stood. "I'll leave you to your work, but Nathaniel—" She paused in the doorway. "Your father would be so proud, not of the title or the estate, of the man you've become, the man she's helped you remember you always were." After she left, Nathaniel and Isabel sat in silence for a long moment. "I was so lost," he said quietly. "Before you. So convinced everyone wanted something from me that I couldn't see the people who just wanted to know me. The real me, not the title. And now I'm found." He took her hand, thumb brushing over her wedding ring. "Because of you, because you refused to let me hide, because you were brave enough to challenge me, honest enough to show me your wounds, and patient enough to wait while I learned to trust. You make it sound heroic. I was just trying to survive. You made surviving look like courage." He kissed her knuckles. "That's the most heroic thing I've ever seen." Evening found them in the garden. Their garden now, the place where he'd proposed. The roses were in full bloom again, heavy with fragrance. "I come here sometimes," Isabel admitted, "when I need to remember." "Remember what?" "That this is real. That I'm allowed to be happy. That I'm not going to wake up and find it was all a dream. It's real." Nathaniel wrapped his arms around her from behind. "You're the Duchess of Wycliffe. You terrify society matrons, charm village shopkeepers, and run this estate with more competence than I ever managed alone. And—" he pressed a kiss to her neck. "You're mine, completely, irrevocably mine." "Yours," she agreed, leaning back against him. "Just as you're mine." They stood together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Isabel thought about the girl who'd fled her stepfather's house with stolen coins and terror, about the woman standing in a duke's garden, secure in the knowledge that she was loved. She'd defied a duke on her first day in his house, expecting consequences. She'd never imagined he would ask her to stay forever, but he had, and she had stayed. And together they were building something neither had imagined possible, a partnership rooted in trust, a love born from mutual transformation, a future where second chances weren't just offered but celebrated. "What are you thinking?" Nathaniel murmured against her hair. "That I love you. That I'm grateful for every moment that led me here. That," she turned in his arms, "that defying you was the best decision I ever made." He laughed, the sound free and joyful. "Remind me to put that in your official Duchess biography. Known for exceptional household management and habitual defiance of ducal authority. It's accurate. It's perfect." He kissed her as the last light faded. "You're perfect. Even when you're defying me, especially when you're defying me. I'll remember that. Please do. I have a feeling I'll need the reminder frequently." They walked back to the house hand in hand, leaving the rose garden behind but carrying its promise with them. The promise of love that endures, trust that heals, and courage that transforms. Isabel had learned that some risks were worth taking, that vulnerability wasn't weakness, that asking for help didn't make you less worthy of receiving it. And Nathaniel had learned that trust wasn't a luxury he couldn't afford. It was the only thing worth having. That protecting people meant empowering them, not controlling them. That love required the kind of bravery he'd spent 3 years avoiding. They'd both learned to be brave, together, and that made all the difference. Thank you for staying with Isabel and Nathaniel until the very end. If their journey reminded you that courage can look like asking for help, that trust is built through consistent choice, and that everyone deserves someone who will defend them publicly and love them privately, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your presence here is why these stories exist. They're written for you, inspired by you, and made meaningful because you choose to listen. Until the next story finds us, thank you for being here.